Hey everybody, welcome back. Here is my bee tumbler and I'm going to show you how I did it. So off camera, I already cut out some vinyl honeycomb, and I also already put epoxy over this cup. I used St. Jude glitter from Peachy Olive Glitters, and I had it in a big piece of honeycomb, and then I just cut out little shapes. As you can see, I'm speeding up the video a little bit because I think that the process takes a little bit of time, and you guys probably understand what I'm doing. But there's no rhyme or reason to the areas that I'm putting the honeycombs. I do try and not put too many up towards the top, just because that's where I'm going to be putting the honey drips at some point. And if I do put it towards the top, as you can see, they're kind of pointing downwards. I don't put them horizontally, and I just kind of place them all over the cup, as you can see what I'm doing now. And I use less than 2 of my little honeycombs, but each cup is different. Honestly, it just depends on where you place them. I've cut each little piece out separately, and they're always different shapes. I like to make sure that there's not really the same shape on each cup. So here's the next part of the video. I've already done this one, but I'm going to show you another one as well during this video. I took alcohol inks and I put it over top of a white spray paint. So after I put the vinyl on the cup, I spray painted it white, let it dry completely, and these are the colors that I did. So that was Valencia, that was Sunset Orange, this one is Ginger, the next one Sunshine Yellow, Lemonade, Honeycomb, that's a really good one. I missed one in there. I'll post a picture of it so that you guys can see every color that I did. And now I'm going to take a makeup blending brush. I know that sounds silly, but honestly, this is the best one that works. And I'm going to take a blending brush. I have a cup of alcohol as well next to me, 91%. And I'm just going to dab each color of alcohol ink on my cup. In between colors, I don't clean the brush because that helps with the blend in between. I also sometimes go in and I take alcohol, and you'll see me kind of dab down onto my table because I do have a little bit of alcohol on the table. And what I do is I just kind of dab my brush on the table, and then I come back up and I blend it a little bit more. So that one I just used honeycomb. As I said before, that was a really, really nice yellow, like a dark yellow. And I came in with some orange now as well. It's gonna look more like a watercolor. Yep, and that one is Ginger. I thought I used Teakwood, but apparently not. You can use Teakwood as well. I like to put a little bit of brown in there. So in general, I have yellows. I have 3 or 4 different shades of yellows, 2 shades of orange, and then 1 brown. And the brown, I definitely want to make sure that it's not super dark. And I'm usually going to go back in and cover that with a yellow or an orange to make it not so obvious. So again, there I'm coming in with a nice yellow color. And you can use whatever alcohol inks you want. I really like the Tim Holtz. I think that they blend really nicely together. As you can see, I've sped up the video quite a bit too because you guys would be here forever otherwise. But a makeup blending brush is the best way to go. I find that the other brushes, like paint brushes, they're not thick enough, and then they don't give you that same look. I want it to look rustic, also kind of like a watercolor. And I don't know if you guys saw that, but there's like this little spot where I accidentally used too much alcohol and it rubbed away some of the paint. See, it's right there. So it's not a huge deal. I'm actually probably going to put a little bee over it so it covers that. You won't be able to see it in the end. But if you accidentally cover or I guess uncover your glitter because the alcohol rubs the paint off. I guess you could go back in with some paint. I feel like that might look blotchy. So hopefully you guys don't do that. But I don't know if I said this or not, but the vinyl is still underneath the spray paint. So when this dries completely, I'm going to come back in and I'm going to use an X-Acto knife and I'm going to pull up the vinyl. I used removable vinyl, but I also ran out of that on my second cup and I used permanent vinyl. I've never done that before, so I guess we'll see in the video if I struggle or not to take off the vinyl. And we're almost done here. After I've covered the cup completely, I'm going to go back around and I'm going to make sure that every color looks nice and blended. If it doesn't, I'm going to either take some alcohol again, or I'm going to go in with a couple other colors and try and lighten it up. Sometimes the cups turn out darker, sometimes they could turn out lighter. It just kind of depends on how each of the colors blend together. I don't worry about it too much. The differences aren't enough for me to worry about. I think they all look really nice every single time. As you can see, I have two that I'm making right now. It's one of my most popular cups on my Etsy page. If you want to check that out, you can go ahead and do that. My Etsy page is the Crafty Teacher 0613. Kind of like this YouTube channel. I also made a cute little pink one at some point too. Alright, so here's what it looks like. And I'm going to come back in now. I've sped it up so you don't have to sit here again. And I'm using my X-Acto knife. And I'm just carefully, it looks a little bit aggressive on the camera, but I guess that's what happens when you do this 2 times faster. But anyways, you're going to come in very, very carefully because you don't want to scratch the paint. You don't want your X-Acto knife to slip, because if it scratches, it's going to leave a mark that doesn't look very nice. So as you can see, I'm peekabooing the yellow glitter underneath, and again, that was St. Jude by Peachy Olive Glitter. So the X-Acto knife that I picked was kind of dull, so I went in and found another one, and as you can see, it's coming up so much nicer. I guess you could use something else too, but I find that my X-Acto knives are really the best way to get this vinyl up. And this was the vinyl that was not removable. This was permanent vinyl as well, and it came up pretty easily. So as long as you don't let it sit there for too long, I let it sit long enough for the alcohol inks to dry, but I didn't let it sit overnight. I guess, you know, I would assume that if you leave it longer, it might leave a residue. If you can, try to do the removable, I think, because it doesn't leave the residue. Again, I didn't have any issue with it, but if I would have left this longer, if I had other cups that I was doing, if I forgot about it, or if I, you know, came back to it a different day, I would worry that there might be some residue on the yellow glitter from the vinyl not being removable. But for this case, it turned out fine, so I'm glad, because that would have been really embarrassing if I would have done that on this video and it not work. But I'm almost done. As you can see, it looks really nice. The yellow glitter kind of sparkles. So here's what the cup looks like. It's almost done. So in between now and this next clip right here, I epoxied my cup. So I'm mixing together the items that I would need for the drip. So I have Athena by Peachy Olive Glitter, Nest Egg mica powder, and Angel Face mica powder. Those two were from Glitter Craze. I really love their mica powders. I think they're really pretty. So I'm just going to come in with a popsicle stick and I'm going to mix those together. But I always make sure that I epoxy first, make sure it's very nice and smooth before I do the drips. Also, if you mess up on the drips, you can wipe it away. If you don't epoxy first, then it becomes an issue. So I'm just adding more. I always seem to accidentally mix too much epoxy whenever I do this, but that's what it looks like with just the mica powder. Almost spilled it there, but yeah, so it's nice and pretty. It almost looks like honey. And then I'm going to come in with Athena by Peachy Olive Glitter, and I'm going to sprinkle a good amount into it. You want to be able to see the glitter, and this has kind of like an opal shift. It's gold with opal. If you look through my other videos, I'm pretty positive that I've used it in almost every single one. It's by far my favorite glitter ever. So I'm just mixing it, and as you can see, I let it sit now. It looks like it happened right away, but I promise you it didn't. And so this is what it looks like as it sat for a while. You want to make sure that it sits for at least, I mean, I guess it depends on the epoxy you're using. I'm using CC DIY, and I let it sit for about 45 minutes to an hour. So I'm going to come in with a popsicle stick, and I'm going to just really carefully see how I'm scraping against the edge of the top of the cup. That's going to give me that little clump of epoxy that's eventually going to drip down. In the areas that don't have a lot of honeycomb, I put more epoxy because then that allows you to have a larger section for the honey to drip. But if the areas that you're putting the honey drip have your honeycomb peekaboo, you're going to want to make sure that you do that a little bit lighter so that it doesn't cover your honeycomb. Otherwise, there was no point of doing a peekaboo there. So as you can see, it's slowly dripping. You don't want it to be too thin because it's going to drip way too fast and it's not going to look right. After you do this, you're going to let it sit for about, I don't know, an hour, and then you're going to hopefully let it dry and it doesn't drip too far. Okay, so there's the first one. Here's the second one. And even from that point, I sped it up twice as fast, but the epoxy was almost to the point where I couldn't use it at this point. So you have a really quick window from when it's like just a little bit too runny to the point where it's like you can't use it. Thank goodness I was able to finish these 2 cups with the epoxy that I had mixed. But you just want to keep an eye on it. You have to mix it constantly as you wait for it to get a little bit thicker. You can't just let it sit, and you run the risk of it also flash curing. It's happened to me a few times. If you let it sit for too long without mixing, it gets really, really hot really, really fast, and it just basically turns into a big clump of epoxy within, 15-20 minutes instead of, whatever, 8 hours or so. But as you can see, it's slowly dripping down, and I'm going to come back in with the first cup that I did, and I'm just gonna fix a couple of things, add a couple more drips that I wasn't happy with before. But as you can see, look how thick it was. I mean, it just barely is usable. So, and that's basically it. So I'm going to epoxy this, and then I'm going to show you how to apply the bees, which is the last step before your final coat or 2 of epoxy. And you'll be ready to go to make this on your own. I'm super excited. I just can't wait for you guys to see. Okay, so the time has passed. I epoxied this cup, so as you can see, it's really, really shiny. I already put the bees on it, but don't worry, I'm going to show you how to do it. So those are the bees I got on Amazon. I'm using some just super glue. I made sure that this is completely hardened. I did this last night, so this is now the next day. And I just put 2 little dots on the back side of the wings. And for my 20-ounce cups, I usually do 5 bees, and there's no rhyme or reason. I put them just dispersed around the cup to make it look random, but also to make it look even. So as you can see, I put some of them up towards the drip, and then I put some that are a little bit further down. And again, I'm only putting 5, so it takes me a second to figure out exactly where I want to put it. As soon as you put the super glue on it, it dries almost instantly, which is why I use the super glue. And that's what I use to adhere the bees on. I do go over it completely with epoxy when it's finished, even over the bees and even over the drip. Some people don't like to do that. I think it looks nice, it looks finished, it really just gives it a nice smooth surface. I used to not do that, and then every once in a while I would find these little spaces around the bees where the epoxy wasn't covered, and then I would have to put another layer on top of it, and so it just didn't seem worth it to me. So now I just epoxy over the whole thing, hit it with my heat gun, and the rest is history. So that is the back side and the front side and all its beautiful glory, and here's what this beautiful cup looks like when it's done. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I love making this tumbler. Leave me a comment below. Let me know what you think. Subscribe to my YouTube. Share this. Have an awesome day.